Start as we always do. What is your version of high performance?
High performance is working hard. I think it's as simple as that. It's the life we live. It's all about high performance between, the athlete, the driver in the car, the machine, the car itself, the engine, the tires, and absolutely everything. And everyone within that organization's got to be, performing at the top level. So I guess that's it.
So let's talk then about where this understanding of hard work came from. So let's just go backwards a few years before Formula One. Your brother raced in go-karts. And is that sort of where the passion came from? But then the question is, where did the understanding of the hard work and the determination and all of that come from?
Yeah, I think having my brother, who's 11 years older than me, going through his journey, he started karting when he was 11 or 12 years old, which in our world is probably 5 years too late. So he was a bit behind the curve. He was an incredibly talented go-kart driver. He won British championships, he won world championships. But unfortunately for him, they were probably 5 years too late, and he missed that opportunity to go into single-seaters and get an opportunity into Formula One. But seeing what he and my father went through, also probably seeing where, he wouldn't mind me saying this, where they sort of fell short and the mistakes he probably made on his journey. I was so fortunate that my family, my parents, and even my brother, who sort of mentored me and helped me through my journey, helped me to avoid some of these mistakes and recognize how hard you need to work, the sacrifices you need to put in if you do want to achieve that success.
And what were those mistakes?
Again, I don't want to talk anything bad about my brother here, but I don't think he'll mind me saying that, when he went to university and, when you're surrounded by some people who maybe aren't the best influence, drinking, partying, probably doing things that a top athlete shouldn't be. Yeah,
but doing things that a university student does.
Yeah,
that's
exactly.
The point. It's like there's no criticism there.
No, absolutely, absolutely. And I think this is where I probably recognized when he was 21, 22, 23, and I was sort of on my journey, started being competitive as a 9, 10, 11-year-old, seeing that, it's not an easy world we live. And if you do want to reach the top, you've got to give it everything. And unfortunately, you just can't go down every single path. You can't go out at the weekends partying and drinking and having fun as a normal sort of teenager is doing if you want to be able to perform on the racetrack at the following weekend.
Wow. So those sacrifices that you saw were being made, were you learning them at quite an easy age when it was easy to make those sacrifices?
Yeah, I think so. I think, I left school when I was 14. And as I was sort of growing up, 15, 16 or 17, I had a few mixed feelings about that. I was pursuing my dream, and I felt so fortunate and grateful that I was getting that opportunity to race. I felt like I was missing a bit of a social life, and I saw the friends who I had at school then, having what you would define as sort of fun and enjoying themselves. But I look back now and I feel like that if I continued in my path with the sort of friends and the group of people who I had around me, that perhaps wouldn't have been the best influence for me to achieve what I wanted to achieve. And I think one thing I've learned from all of that is the people you surround yourself are so important.
Yeah. So go on, tell us about that then. So what have you learned about the characters that you allow into your inner circle?
I think you need to recognize if somebody's bringing positivity to you or not. And I think having achieved a bit of success, reaching Formula One, you do see people who sort of come out the woodworks and, try and get a piece of that success, or, even if it's something, can you get some tickets here or there, or thinking it's so simple. And you sort of think to yourself, well, I've not heard from you in 5, 6, 7 years. And, you weren't there when I went through the struggle. You're sort of there now that I'm succeeding. And I'm always trying to be polite with everybody. So I'd always try and help in a situation like that. But suddenly when it goes a little bit too far and these people are sort of sucking energy away from you, you almost think you don't need people like that in my life. And I do think now I have such a close amount of people around me. I don't have loads of friends. I've probably got a handful of friends who I speak to on a weekly basis. I've got my girlfriend, I've got my family, and that's kind of all I need, really.
It reminds me of, we interviewed Vicky Patterson. She was a lady that sort of made a career in reality TV.
And I may have watched that.
Right, okay, yes.
I may have watched some of that when I was a bit younger.
But she spoke to us really powerfully about what you've just described, and she came up with what she calls the phone test. So how she responds when somebody's name crops up in her phone determines where they are. So some people, she said, light up your life. They were igniters. Some people were draggers.
Yeah.
Because all they're ever phoning for is to want the tickets.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
then she described that the vast majority of people are middle of the roaders, where they don't offer any value, but they don't detract from it either. And that was the way that she determined it. So what is the biggest lesson that you've learned then to be able to keep people at bay that are bringing negativity or just wanting things?
I think you've always got to be polite to everybody, and I never want to be arrogant, or I never like to ignore people or be rude. But I think, as I said, sometimes you've got to look out for yourself and recognize you can't please everybody. You've got to please the people around you. You've got to try and please yourself. But when you try, and I used to struggle at saying no to things. You know, somebody would ask me to do something. Yeah, no problem. You know, can I see you for a cup of coffee? Yeah, no problem. Can we do this? And when I look at my diary in a month's time, it kind of looks quite empty. But, you know, 1 week later, 2 weeks later, suddenly that diary's filling up pretty damn quickly. And I get to the time I think, Christ, I'm going for, you know, a quick cup of coffee with this person, or I'm doing this event, which isn't really adding any value to me. If anything, it's taken away from my performance. This is an opportunity. I could have been in the gym. It's an opportunity. I could have been on the phone with my engineers preparing for an event. And I come away from something like that just feeling a bit more downbeat, a bit more tired, thinking to myself, you know, this is not bringing anything to my life. And you have to almost be selfish in a regard.
And are you the sort of person now that needs the friends and the social stuff and the going out and you know, having a couple of drinks or letting your head down? Or are you totally happy to be in this world of kind of single-minded focus and determination in achieving your Formula One goals? Because let's be clear, if we're having this conversation in 10 years, we probably introduce you as veteran Formula One driver. That's if you've managed to get 10 years in a sport, which most drivers don't, right? So you're very much in a moment, I think. Is that part of your thinking?
It's... I sort of question myself as well in that way. I don't have the answer. I think, you know, throughout this year, I've obviously taken a big step, joining Mercedes, sort of in the big leagues as such, with, you know, those three top teams at the forefront of Formula One. And I kind of want to keep an open mind. I think so many people say, you know, you need to be so dedicated. You know, every single day needs to be the most important day of your life. You can't be out drinking, partying, whatever. But there's definitely an element of you need to be happy, you need to enjoy yourself, and you need to be in the right state of mind. And there are times when, you know, I've just come off the back of 2 very difficult race weekends. You know, these were 2 of my worst 3 races of this whole season. And it was Sunday night in Singapore, awful race. I was just laying in my bed. A couple of people went out for some nice dinner. They might have had a drink or 2. I wouldn't have had a drink because I was racing the following week. I was just laying in my bed because I didn't have that motivation to go out. But I didn't sleep at all that night because all I could think about was that race, that disappointment, and how things could have gone better. And perhaps had I gone for dinner with a couple of friends, taking my mind totally away from that disappointment, I'd have got, you know, a good 8-9 hours sleep that night, and I'd have been in better shape for the following race weekend. So in a way, by doing something that you think is the right thing to do, by trying to get an early night's sleep, by not going for dinner or whatever and just relaxing in a room, that played against me in a way.
Yeah, I can understand that. And it is, you're totally right, it's about exploring. You will find over time the things that work well for you.
Absolutely.
In a more elite environment. So let's wind the clock back and talk about how you ended up in this elite environment. Your brother is go-karting, you're going along, you start racing, you see his mistakes, you then develop this kind of single-minded focus. Can we just go through, you've sort of brushed it off as not a big deal, but walking away from school at 14 is a big deal.
Yeah.
Because that's kind of like a contract there with everyone in your life where you go, I'm not just going to be a normal kid, I'm going to give up education at 14 years of age. I mean, it feels to me like there's a bit of pressure automatically applied at that point, because it's like, okay, you better make this work.
Yeah, I guess so. I think I always believed that I'd make it to Formula One. I think as a child, you're a bit naive in that regard. When I was probably 11 years old, I believed I could achieve anything. I felt like I could fly to the moon and back easily. And I used to have races that I felt so superior to everyone. I remember this one race that I said, I'm going to overtake this person on the last lap in this corner, because I felt like I could do it. And it was the most stupid thing ever, but I managed to achieve it. And at that age, I just felt like I could do anything. And that probably played against me as I grew up slightly. And when I left school at 14, I had a similar view that I felt like I could achieve anything in this world. You go out, you win, and you'll be a Formula One world champion before you know it. And it was only when I was 15 or 16 that I started to recognize that life isn't as straightforward as that. You know, you may be very talented, but you need to do a hell of a lot more if you want to make it. The stars need to align, especially in a sport like ours where there's only 20 race seats available. And it's not like there's 20 race seats available every year. There's only 1 or 2 race seats available every year for a great driver to come in. A great driver's got to leave. So yeah. I was growing up racing against thousands of different kids, all striving for that same goal. Yet every year there's only going to be 1 or 2, if you're lucky, make it to Formula One. And I guess, yeah, when I was 16, I realised...
How did you come to that realisation then?
I came to that realisation that I think when I was 15, I had a bit of a tricky year in go-karting. That was probably my worst year in go-karts.
Is that your first year after you'd left education as well?
It was, coincidentally. Whether that had anything to do with it or not, I'm not sure. I don't think it did, because I think I know what went wrong that season. I then raced my first year in single-seaters in Formula 4. So, you know, that's a small Formula 1 car, effectively bottom of the range when you're 16 to 18 years old. And I won that championship, but I hadn't been picked up from a Formula 1 team. And I was sort of thinking to myself, you know, what do I need to do to get an opportunity with an F1 team? I won this championship, I've won races. I didn't dominate the championship, but I won the championship. And I wasn't getting that break as such. And it was towards the tail end of that year, I thought, this might not work. And that's when, at the end of that season, I got Toto's email and emailed him.